Welcome on, welcome all to the Tortillas and Takes podcast. You are on once again with your boy, Albie Shore, and we are all hoping and praying for a much better weekend this upcoming Saturday than what we had last Saturday. But this time we're taking our show on the road to Fort Worth, a drive away. So it's like literally the only place Texas Tech can drive and not have to fly. So going to M&G Carter Stadium in Fort Worth to take on the TCU Horned Frogs to talk about this game and try to improve Joey McGuire's road record. We have, of course, the People's Champ, Jeramey Gillen. What's up, Jeramey?
Hello, Albie. I, like most Texas Tech fans, have existed in the pendulous state where I wanted to destroy the program, and then I had a couple sleeps, ate some food, went about my daily life, and now I'm reaching a point of optimism that this could be a good game. I'm trying to be level-headed here and say I really wanted to say we're going to lose this game, and I wanted to stick to that. But it's hard for me to stick to that now since I've gotten so far away from the emotion. So, I'm ready to talk about TCU Horned Frogs and their nightmarish mascot.
Ooh, okay, a little foreshadowing there. Let's see what the predictions are looking like then, We'll say Texas Tech looked awful last week while TCU looked good. So we'll see. And then also joining us is the faceless Red Raider expert himself, Joe Lopez. What's going on, Joe?
Gentlemen, how are you guys doing? I am here trying to figure out a camera issue with a MacBook, but still kind of new to the Mac world. But yeah, let's put to bed, or we've already put to bed the Baylor game. It's been over almost close to a week now. We could stop crying over spilt milk per se, but let's get on to Fort Worth and get back on track, because it doesn't get any easier after that. So we have to take care of business whenever it's low-hanging fruit like that. And, TCU is one of those football teams that we could get back on the right track, or at least in theory, we should be able to.
Who the hell came up with the saying crying over spilled milk? Who spilled milk, started, and then the brother started crying. I was like, well, if you don't shut up, crying over spoiled milk or spilled milk or whatever. Who came up with that?
Have your kids ever done that, like when they were younger, Albie?
Like crying over them dropping? My kids cry over everything. Okay. I'm sure, but they cry over everything.
Do you actually want to know? I just looked it up.
I do.
The phrase cry over spilt milk originated with English historian and writer James Howell, who wrote "There's no weeping for shed milk" in 1659. His book Paramoiography. Oh my God, I'm not going to read that one. The phrase has evolved over time, but the meaning remains the same. It's not worth being upset about something that has already happened.
So he made it up.
100%. And he never knew how big that phrase would get. He thought that's a good singer, and he put it in his book, and now it's just a common thing.
Listen, I respect it. If it's made up, I made it up is a valid reason for me. I know it doesn't sound like it should be.
Made it up.
But I just made it up. I'm like, you know what? All right, respect. Okay. Anyways, Texas Tech, TCU this weekend. So, Joe, what are your initial thoughts thinking about this quote-unquote road game in Fort Worth?
Just initial thoughts on just based on what kind of, not trying to look too far ahead, but what the rest of our schedule holds. These are one of these games that you need to take care of on the road. 2 weeks ago, this looked like 2 wins, back to back between Baylor and TCU. And, ultimately the Baylor game happened, and, that's 1 L. This is one of those games that we need to go into Fort Worth with that mentality that our backs are against the wall, because even though we're sitting at 5-2 for the year, it does not feel like we are 5-2 on the year. It feels like we are 1-6 trying to figure out how we're going to right the ship. And it doesn't need to be that way. We've shown that we could do better than what we've put out on the field, especially this last Saturday. So, but first initial thoughts, a lot of soul searching and looking in the mirror for this Texas Tech football team and coaching staff to go on the road and take care of business in Fort Worth, where, we should have at least a 50-50 split of Tech fans out there.
Yeah, the price for this game is still expensive, which tells me Tech fans are still buying it up. And TCU fans doing it, So yeah, I still do believe that this will be, and with these games, to TCU's credit, right? I don't necessarily do the whole they don't have fans thing with TCU, because they do. TCU does have fans. They don't have fans like us. Even usually with this game in Fort Worth, typically there are more TCU fans there, as there should be. It's a home game for them. And the split typically is anywhere between 60-40 and 70-30, right? However, the crowd noise always sounds 50-50, right? Always. TCU, they're a little bit more reserved, a little bit more like, oh, we're just here to watch a good football game. Tech fans, we don't have no home training. We're going to get up, we're going to stand, we're going to shout, we're going to do all that stuff. So even if the split in the crowd isn't 50-50, the noise will definitely sound 50-50. You will hear some radio powers in that stadium, which is always a great thing. Jeramey, what's your initial thoughts of this game?
I mean, after last week, and it shouldn't be a surprise. The score always sucks, but we talked early in the summer and continued through the summer that this is a league of parity. You can't really come out and not play your best game, because as Baylor exemplified, anybody can get you in this league. And TCU took a hard loss to Houston, who we would consider the bottom of the league, and turn around and then go win against Utah. And so it's like the consistency in this league will ultimately be a problem until some team really starts to solidify itself as a perennial. It's going to be a problem in the conversation about like the playoffs, because they're always going to be like, well, Big 12 is a one-bid league, even though for some reason, whenever the SEC devours itself, it's because they're all so good. And when we devour ourselves, it's because we suck. So, but that's bias for you. You got to come out strong. I mean, I think that, hey, we spilt the milk. We lost against Baylor bad. The best thing you can do is be the goldfish, come out against TCU at an away game. Doesn't matter, an away game period is always a good win in football. It's something that Joey's not had a lot of success with. You go out and you beat TCU by 1 point or more, then you've watched the Baylor game for me, right? Because I think that you have an opportunity to kind of set the ship right, because there's a lot of big games coming up after TCU. Like, it doesn't necessarily get easier. It just gets more complicated. And so this one, you have got to come out swinging.
So a win against TCU washes the Baylor game for you. That's interesting. No harm, no foul, as long as you win this game, going 1-1 in that one. That is interesting. I don't agree, but it's definitely it's definitely, because to me, I think that it's more of them losing to Baylor wiped away the Arizona State win for me. Right. Like, so now I think, I did kind of look at us and expect us to be 5-2 after the Baylor game. And that was with the thought that we would lose to Arizona and beat Baylor. And so the Arizona game was a good win on the road in Tucson, but then was wiped away by the loss against Baylor. So now I look at it just like we were 2 weeks ago when we were 4-1, and we had considerably thought we hadn't really played anybody. So there was no point in us, feeling high and mighty about ourselves. I think we're just back at that aspect, to me anyway. But I do think a win against Baylor, or against TCU, at the very least keeps that going. You get bowl eligibility, like you talked about in the last podcast, and we can kind of at least check that mark off away. So, Joe, looking at this TCU offense, right? I know me and Jeramey were talking a little bit pre-pod as far as Josh Hoover and what we thought about him as a quarterback. So Josh Hoover was a guy that was supposed to be the backup last year. It's supposed to be Chandler Morris's team. We played Chandler Morris already. We got him up out of here. Josh Hoover won the job last year over Morris. Bam. He's TCU starter. He's TCU's player. Last year was a guy that threw 9 interceptions, was pretty pass happy, as a Sonny Dykes team always is. But he also was pass happy to his team and the other team. This year, he's taking the ball, carrying the ball a little bit better. That's not really saying much, but still kind of throwing the ball to the other team at some points. What is your read on Josh Hoover as a quarterback?
It's a little bit of a mixed bag. It's not ever consistent. It hasn't been consistent the last 2 seasons. 6 interceptions to 16 touchdowns this year. He's He's the gunslinger. He's the guy who tries to fit the ball in those narrow windows. And, ultimately this is what causes him to have all these ill-advised turnovers. It's just, trying to put the ball where, there's nobody else to get it. But, ultimately the defense, secondary, cornerbacks, linebackers, have all had their shots at interceptions here with him. But a lot of that is also based on pressure. Josh Hoover is not the same quarterback whenever he's under duress. He's throwing, I think his completion percentage is sub 40 or right around mid 40s when he's under pressure. And then this is whenever he does try to make some of those throws to, make a play instead of just throwing the ball away. So I think the key to this game ultimately, which we'll touch base on here shortly, but pressuring Josh Hoover, because whenever he's under duress, he's not the same quarterback as he is whenever you give him time to sit back in the pocket. He does still have over 2,000 passing yards, 16 touchdowns, and he does have a decent group of playmakers on the outside. But like I said, it's just one of those deals. If you get pressure on him, I think he's out of his element in his game. So I think DeRuyter's going to have to do something to get pressure on this kid for us to be successful.
So, Jeramey, what did you were talking about Hoover before? Hoover does lead the Big 12 in passing yards. So, Buddy can definitely sling it. More passing yards than Shedeur Sanders and over Baron Morton, who are second and fourth in the conference, respectively. Jeramey, what's your read on Mr. Hoover?
Kind of like Joe said, I mean, he's pretty inconsistent. I will say his 3 interceptions came across SMU, Kansas, and Houston. They did beat Kansas, but they lost against SMU and Houston. SMU and Houston did a really good job at, like Joe again said, creating pressure on Hoover, which does completely change his game. I am also of the mindset that maybe TCU really doesn't have the personnel to allow Hoover to be creative anyways. Like, I think that they've had a good week of practice. I think that really the problem with TCU right now is that there's really no showstoppers that they've been used to having in the capacity that has a chemistry with Hoover, is what I mean. So when the play breaks down, he really doesn't have anywhere to go. And so he'll try to force it a lot. Now, I would love to say that encourages me, but like last week, we have shown that we're not sometimes interested in getting pressure on the quarterback. So if we don't do that, then yeah, Hoover's going to come out being the Big 12 leader in passing. He'll have an efficient game when they beat Utah. He didn't have an interception. He didn't have a touchdown either, but he didn't have an interception, still racked up about 260-something yards. Like, he can play a game where he gets no touchdowns and they have a great game, right? So it's like it's going to be hard to – it's a Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde is what Hoover is, at least what he's shown in the past couple of games. So if we're not pressuring, then we're going to get – I actually don't know who that would be in that scenario, but we're going to get one of the two that we don't want, maybe Mr. Hyde, right? So – he can be dangerous, but he really doesn't have to be if we play a decent defensive scheme.
So Josh Hoover is definitely an issue. I mean, like I mentioned before, leads the Big 12 in passing yards, fourth in the country in passing yards. And it's very much, I think Sonny Dykes has the quarterback he has been looking to have at TCU since he got there. Right? Max Duggan led this team to a national championship game, but that's not the type of quarterback Sonny Dykes wants. Chandler Morris is the type of quarterback Sonny Dykes wanted, but it just didn't work out with him. Like, that was just not a – Morris just ended up not really being the type of quarterback that TCU needed. But Josh Hoover has been. I mean, he does have nice zip on the ball. He can get the ball from A to B quite a bit, and then I think he's been able to really find a really good relationship with his star receiver out there in Jack Beck. And so – actually, now that you have a guy that you can target for TCU, and not only with having Hoover having that connection with Beck, but also Sonny Dykes loves targeting a receiver. Having a receiver as the guy has always been his mantra. It's how he got Quentin Johnson to have the incredible year that he had a couple years ago as well. So I think offensively, Hoover, especially Hoover to Beck, has worked out really well for TCU. The reason why, though, if you've seen and you look at TCU's game, and the last 2 weeks, they have scored a grand total of 32 points. 32 points in 2 weeks against Houston, who might have the worst defense in the conference, And Utah, who does actually have a good defense, but they're just a bit dysfunctional. And Isaac Wilson was given a really good field position. They probably should have scored more than the 13 they scored, right? So in both situations, Hoover was able to put up yards. I mean, against Utah, he had 263 yards, but it just didn't matter, right? 263 yards and 13 points, hoorah, And so I do think that as a quarterback, Hoover has the goods, but you can put him in scenarios like Joe was mentioning, put him in scenarios where he's making mistakes, where he's rushed. And if we look at Texas Tech's track record against these pocket passers, it's been a little bit up and down, right? Like Sorsby carved us up. Sorsby didn't have to run like that. Straight up carved us up. Robertson carved us up, right? Didn't even have to run like that. Carved us up. But then Morris struggled. Morris, very similar to Hoover, really, really struggled in this game against us over with UNT. So, so it does at least give me some bit of hope that this defense can wrap them up. So one thing, Jeramey, is I've already talked about Jack Beck as a receiver. What other weapons does Hoover have, or is it just Beck or bust?
No, it may seem a bit silly, but Cam Cook, I think, has been playing a little bit better lately. I think he's starting to get settled in. I think their offensive line is really starting to get a little bit more, I'd say, chemistry, right? His kind of big games lately, and now the Utah game is a bit of an anomaly, but it's also not. But against Kansas and Houston, getting over 50 yards and, nearly 5 a carry. The Houston game, even though they lost, 5.5 yards a carry, like that'll play. And that'll play because Texas Tech has had a hard time in a couple recent games, stopping running back. And again, hopefully the Baylor game is an anomaly and we're not going to allow somebody who only has like 300-something yards cook on us, because I can already see the tweets. If he goes off, I'm going to see some stupid TCU burner making a Cook joke. But he is somebody to watch out for. There it is. He is somebody to watch out for because of how our offense did not handle Baylor last weekend. So I think Cam Cook is going to be somebody that we have to watch out for, because if Hoover gets Cam cooking, then he's just gonna have a lot more, like, it's in the same situation that if Barron has Taj, like he feels more comfortable in the pocket. He feels like he can, it's not all on him, which is where Hoover has had some issues. So if Cam gets going, this can be a long day for us for sure.
I hate you so much.
Why? I'm sorry, I have some personality.
I kind of seem like the chef in you talking too much about cooking.
God, don't do this. Oh, goodness gracious.
Are we cooked, chat? We are cooked.
Oh, my God. Okay, I was going to actually continue this talk about Cam Cook and how he has been their leading running back for 4 games, but hasn't been their leading running back for the last 2. As a guy like Savion Williams has really been able to show his size and his versatility in both the receiving and running game. But I never want to hear Cam Cook's name again. Now, all right?
Let's get out the kitchen. Let's get out the kitchen. Let's go.
So Joe, what is your thoughts regarding this O-line, right? So Cam Cook, his average at running about 3.5 yards per carry isn't anything to really be scared of. But this O-line has done an okay job of keeping Josh Hoover up. Is this O-line something that we can pierce through?
They're not necessarily great in run blocking, as you would imagine, given, their lead rusher on the team is sitting at like 350 yards on the season. It's just not their mantra. This is just not their game to be running the ball heavy doses. But, guess what? We said that against Baylor last week, and, we got carved up. Given the circumstances, they do have an Alabama transfer. I think it's Brockemeyer is their center. And he's kind of leading the charge. And if you have a good center position guard or center guy, he's the one who communicates with the rest of the offensive line. He's the one who gets guys lined up. And, obviously, given how much TCU throws a ball, they're giving Hoover, some chances out there to make these throws. That's why he's leading the conference in passing yards. But they're not going to out athlete you. But they're just, continuity between them. They are starting to play a little bit better, not so much on the rushing side. I think a lot of the running yards that they've gotten have just been based on the athlete who's running it in Savion Williams back there. He's just a weapon that you have to try to utilize to get the ball, and he just makes plays whenever he has the ball. So whether it, like I said, me and Jeramey were talking about just, how DeRuiter is going to try and exploit this. Because, the sitting back and waiting for the quarterback to make the right reads is just not our should be the game plan for this game. We need to be putting some kind of pressure on Hoover and making this offensive line, have some issues up front, because like we said, Hoover's just not the same quarterback when he's under duress. But, if we give him the time back there, then, here comes another one coming into town that's just carves our secondary up, So we'll see what happens, but they do have a good center, and he's like I said, Alabama transfer.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely seems like this TCU team and offense really relies on a quarterback. And Hoover, I think honestly, it's a lot to put on a quarterback in Josh Hoover. I think Josh Hoover could, in the next, like in 2025, 2026, could be a stud. Like we could be talking about him in NFL drafts eventually. Like I think he could be very good. I just think that they put a lot on him now. Now we were talking about Isaac Wilson from Utah, who I kind of feel the same way about him later. Like right now, he stinks. Isaac Wilson does, but he's also a freshman. In 3 years, he could be really good. So for Josh Hoover, who's continually growing, last year I saw him throw a bunch of picks. This year I see him throw less. Next year he could be really good. If he stays for a fourth year, he could be even better. So luckily we're catching him now, in that you're putting everything on him with really only Cam C and Jack Beck to really help them, with Savion Williams and Richardson kind of coming on in the end, and a sketchy O-line. And it's a lot on Hoover's shoulders for now that could benefit later, but we're just reaping the benefits of him still being young in this very moment. Jeramey?
You talking about Wilson? Is he related to that other Wilson guy?
I did just find out he is related to Zach Wilson. I maybe I'm stupid. State of Utah, my bad. Right?
How many Wilsons can there be there?
Well, I was over here before the pod, and I'm over here like, man, that Isaac Wilson looks very familiar. Where have I seen that face before? And I was like, oh yeah, he looks like that. Zach Wilson. Remember Zach Wilson? He's played for the Jets. It's crazy. Wait a minute. Sure enough, it's his younger brother. Going to his Zach Wilson's rival school. And if I really wanted to piss I don't have a brother. I really wanted to piss my brother off, I would go to a rival school, right? But if I had a brother that I loved, I'd go to Charlie Hustle and get him something, right? Charlie Hustle is a vintage-inspired clothing company based out of Kansas City, the undefeated Kansas City Chiefs hometown, Kansas City, Missouri, and where they are also the home of Patrick Mahomes, our beloved Patrick Mahomes. And because of our beloved Patrick Mahomes, you can get some Chiefs stuff from them. You can also get some Texas Tech stuff from them at charliehustle.com using our promo code 101215 to get 15% off of all non-sale items. Again, that is TEN1215 for 15% off. Charlie Hustle wants you to be the best dressed fan this season, so make sure to go to charliehustle.com. Promo code 101215, Charlie Hustle, vintage made fresh. So as we switch to the other side of the ball here and look at TCU's defense, got to tell you guys, I feel a lot better. I feel a lot better looking at their defense. And on one hand, you say, well, no, Albie, what are you talking about? The defense held Mr. Isaac Wilson to 13 points last week. They must be pretty good. We have to be really worried about them. This is also the same defense that gave up 30 points to Houston's backup quarterback, right? So as great as TCU's offense is, the defense, which ranks in the bottom 5 in points given up, ranks in the bottom 5 in yards given up, is one that don't feel as bad. Jeramey?
You can look at it like that, you can also see that we're much lower than they are. And that's one way to look at it. I think something to be mindful of, though, is that kind of a key stat that I've been watching, or kind of like interested in seeing how it's going to play out, is that right now I think Morton's averaging about 270 yards per game, right? And the TCU defense is only giving up about 161 yards a game through the air. So it's going to be the only team right now that's thrown against them over 200 is UCF, and that they still and they got that win. Excuse me. So I think that it's like the numbers don't really add up for them, but at the same time, like if they're going to hold us to a lower average than we're used to, like how are we like getting around that? And so hopefully and thankfully, like we've got Taj Brooks, and TCU does like to give up about 160 yards of rushing. So hopefully, to me, I'm hoping that means a couple of big Taj breakoffs, and we don't have to really rely on the passing attack. But if for some reason, we're put in a spot, if we get down early and we're put in a spot where Kitley's like, no, we just got to pass it to get back, then we might be in a little bit of a pickle. That's a very like specific, that is a very specific scenario, but it's one that has happened in the past. And so I don't want to say TCU's defense is bad, because if we get into a spot where we're relying on the pass, that is to our disadvantage.
So I do got to make a correction. I said they were bottom 5 in yards given up. They're bottom 5 in rushing yards given up. So just like you were saying, that is something that is susceptible. Us being a rushing team, we should be looking at this defense like, ooh, that's food, right? You're giving up 160 yards on average, and we got one of the top 5 running backs in the country. So, hey, Taj, a 200-yard game ain't too far from you in this one, right? But flip side, to your point, the reason they're not bottom 5 in yards given up is because bend but don't break. They don't, even with the exception of the SMU game where they broke a lot. With the exception of that game, they have done a decent job of not giving up too many passing yards over the course of the season. Now, flip side, I will say this is where I say that stats lie. Remember that TV show on ESPN said numbers never lie? I never knew if that was sarcastic or not, because numbers lie all the time. And so they are actually ranked second in the conference in passing yard given up. They only give up 160 yards per pass. And here's the issue with that, right? Who the hell have they played? Because it's always a red flag when I see a team that's bottom 5 in points given up, yet second in the conference in passing yards, right? Yeah. So who have they played to be this way? Because they played UCF. Who's the quarterback? Oh, KJ Jefferson. He's not much of a thrower. All right. Well, so that explains it on that end. Okay. Well, but who else? Who else did they play? Well, who did they play week 1? Oh wait, week 1 they played Stanford. Well, Ashton Daniels isn't really much of a thrower either. I mean, he was billed to be a guy that hasn't really had a good passing season because they're not great. Well, there has to be other teams that have really lit them up this year. What about SMU? Right? SMU, they're a front flowing spread offense, and you say, oh well, but their offense was humming on the ground. They didn't need to pass the ball very much, and Kevin Jennings, the quarterback for SMU, really didn't do too much there. I think he only passed the ball like less than 20 times. So, okay, well, what about conference play? Like, let's get into conference play. What else? Other than KJ Jefferson, who else have they played there? There has to be. All right, they played Kansas, which Jalen Daniels has had a struggle bus of a season. Now, that was probably the best game the secondary has played all season, right? They held him to only 179 yards, and he just could not throw the ball. So I'll give TCU credit against Kansas, right? But it's also a Jalen Daniels who's having a hellish of a season. And then who? I know I just said they played Isaac Wilson last week. He stinks so far. And I'm missing one. Oh, yeah, that's right. Houston, who had to bench Donovan Smith in that game because he was playing not so great. And they started Zion Chris, his backup, who actually did have a decent game, went 15 for 18 in that game and was carving the secondary up, right? But, again, is not a passing quarterback. He uses his legs more than anything. This is the same guy that almost ran for 100 yards. almost had more rushing yards than he had passing yards. We didn't need to throw the ball very much or very far. So when I look at this TCU team and say, okay, well, they're second in the conference in passing yards, well, it's because every quarterback they've played either didn't pass the ball or didn't pass the ball far. I didn't need to, right? Kansas game, I gave all credit to TCU's pass defense. They were great in the Kansas game. Outside of that Kansas game, they haven't really done much. So, it's one thing to say that this TCU pass defense is something to watch out. Nobody's really tested them like that to see just what can the levee break. And I want this game to be the one we test them. Joe, what are your thoughts there?
On their secondary or defense in the whole?
Just defense as a whole.
Defense in the whole is just, I mean, it's kind of like us to a degree. I mean, sometimes you get this, sometimes you get that. Their secondary sometimes shows up, sometimes it doesn't. They do have some their I think defensive lineman. I don't know what his name is. He's a number 11. They kind of use him in a bunch of different ways. They put him on the edge. They put him as a linebacker for stunts. They kind of move him all over the field. He's kind of like their utility guy who essentially is their biggest piece on their defense. And that, like I said, they've used him in a bunch of different ways there. And if we don't have our pass protection or run blocking in, this guy is one of those guys that, you give him any kind of slither of hope, he's going to start exploiting some of the weaknesses that this offensive line has showed over the course of this season. So, but overall on their defense, I mean, they hold certain teams to a certain amount. They've played, these teams as well. But it's just nothing super impressive. It's nothing that just jumps out on the page and says, oh, wow, this defense is stifling. Like, how are we going to score 35 points? I think you have all the makings there to, put up a lot of points on this defense. It's there. You just have to go out there and take it. So like I said, they do have some players there. They have players there like Hodges as well. Has been around the block for a minute there. He seems like he's been in the Big 12 conference for 35 years as well, like with Alan Bowman and, Cam Rising. So, that he has a lot of that experience in getting the guys lined up where they need to. But overall, this defense isn't a scary defense. And we have, like I said, we have the tools on our offensive side to make this a very long afternoon for the Horned Frogs.
I will say I got to give the shout outs to two people on the defense. I'd be remiss if I didn't. So Obiazor is definitely somebody that's had a pretty good season this year, coming off the edge for them. He's definitely going to be somebody that we're going to have to make sure. Caleb Rogers and Obiazor are going to be best friends at the end of the day. They're going to see each other quite a bit in this game. And then another guy that I got to give a shout out to, not because I think he's good, but because he's also Ghanaian. So I got to, Osafo Mensah, what's up, man? They're like, hey, I hope you lose, but I hope you play well. All right, that's hey, sorry, guys, got to do it. So, shout out to my cousin Nana, and I'll leave all of our white listeners to know whether he's really my cousin or not. But yeah, no, I think defensively they do have. It's funny because this team does play a nickel scheme. But they have some guys in the front seven you would expect their run defense to be a lot better than. I mentioned Obiozor, you mentioned Hodges. They have some safeties that are also pretty good, especially at the line of scrimmage. And Jamel Johnson, right? Jamel Johnson at the line of scrimmage is also pretty good, but I think he has been at his best when he's a roamer and just watching those crossing routes and watching some of those things in the passing game. But you would think that with some of these guys, they'd be so much better defensively in the front seven against the run, and they're just not. They just get bullied a lot of the times against the run, right? And so, and maybe you could argue flip side of that. They played guys like KJ Jefferson and Zion Chris, and maybe that's what's been a big problem of it. But also, again, I watched all of that Houston TCU game, and they just got bullied at times. They got bullied by Houston at home, right? Which is embarrassing. I was trying to think of another word for it. It's embarrassing. I don't know how they were able to live with themselves with that one. I mean, Lamarian James, their cornerback, even mentioned that they haven't played well at home, right? They have not played well in the Amon G. Carter Stadium. And so I think that is something that they're going to want to show out and perform well in front of their home crowd. But unfortunately for you guys, and this is a TCU team that is 1-2 at home this year, but unfortunately for them, it's not going to feel like a home game. Right? Like that's the thing is that they're saying here that we haven't played well at home. Well, it's not going to feel like a home game. And maybe they don't need a home game, The last 2 games they played on the road, they've won at Kansas and at Utah. So maybe they'll be more at home. But, Lamar and James talking about how they need to play better at home. Well, this ain't going to really feel like home to you. At best, it's going to feel like a neutral site game, right? At worst, you start giving up some points to Texas Tech, it's going to start feeling like more of a road game sooner rather than later because, again, we ain't got no home training. So, with that being said, it is time for our Prize Picks predictions. That's right. You can go to Prize Picks, download the app, go ahead, put $100 in that thing. And if you do put $100 in that thing, we're going to give you a 100% match up to that $100 for you to get an extra $100, right? If you don't want to put $100, you just want to put $50, put the $50 match. If you're cheap like me and just want to try it out for $5, do that. We still going to give you the 100% match for that first time in. So go to prizepicks.com. And when you're doing that, get that 100% match, use our promo code TAKES12, TAKES12 to get that 100% match. That's TAKES12, TAKES12. So starting off with you, Joe, what is the keys to the game for a Texas Tech victory?
Pressure on the quarterback. We've talked about what kind of quarterback Josh Hoover is whenever he's under duress. And, we know what kind of defense we have whenever we do not put a quarterback under any kind of pressure, under any circumstance. Those games haven't gone well for us, even though we did beat, Cincinnati, but so to speak, carved us up, absolutely carved us up. And it's just one of those things. This is their first game without Duda Banks. How's our defensive line going to respond after losing a very major piece? Now you have some other guys. Trevin McAlpine, I think, is going to get the start here. And this is a group that has to show something, or DeRuiter has to scheme up something here to make the day very rough for Josh Hoover. But I think the defensive line, linebacking groups, and getting pressure on Josh Hoover is going to be one of the biggest keys to this game for Texas Tech to be successful in Fort Worth on Saturday afternoon.
You know what's interesting after the Baylor game? I heard Joey McGuire directly in the media basically address his players through the media in a scathing way, probably the most I've ever heard of. Right? He talked about the front seven's inability to get to the quarterback. He talked about how, we brought a blitz. We brought blitz, and I didn't necessarily agree that we brought blitzes. I don't think we did. But when they brought blitzes, the D tackles didn't get there when it came to gap exchanging. The edge didn't. They didn't have an edge player that was setting the edge appropriately. They weren't gap sound. Like, he talked about all of this, and I was like, "Wow, Joey, look at you, man, holding the players accountable." Right? He talked about all this in the media this week about when he was reflecting on the Baylor game, and so I actually do expect, Joe, to your point, I would be very surprised if we brought 3 for most of the game again. I actually do think we're going to bring the house like we did against UNT. We brought a lot of, like, Josh Hoover reminds me a lot of Chandler Morris, not just because they both are the TCU starting quarterback last year, but because they do also play similarly. And so in that game, we did bring the house a little bit more, and I expect some of that as well, even though we have lost some of those guys in our front seven. Jeramey, what are your Texas Tech keys for victory?
Honestly, it's along the line of Joe's. For me, it's just switch up the defense, because last week was abysmal. I don't care if it was we were calling the right plays, but the guys weren't executing, or if we honestly weren't calling the right plays. Whatever it was, it didn't work. That's the period of it. So switch up the defense, man. If we're struggling on the defensive line, draw up some more linebacker stunts. We did that so well earlier this season. Draw up more linebacker pressure. Like, we've got great linebackers. Send one in, right? Make Hoover uncomfortable. Like, make him feel like he's got to run for his life. Something, right? Because the 3-down lineman is not going to do it. Not going to do it this game. So, and God forbid, if we're running a zone and we keep getting picked off, I'm going to throw a fit. I'm going to throw a fit, man.
All right. So my key for victory is keep the pressure up. Keep the pressure up. I actually think Texas Tech is going to start off hot and heavy. I think their players are going to heed their coach's word. And so I think we just need to keep our foot on their necks. Don't let up. Keep the pressure up the whole game. I want TCU to really feel us, because I do think this is a team that you can knock down and keep knocking down a bit. I don't think this team is very good. And so keep the pressure up at all times throughout this game. So that's my key So, Jeramey, starting with you, give us your prize pick prediction for this game.
Yeah.
Oh, actually,
I think.
hold on. Sorry about that, Jeramey. Sorry to cut you off. I got to set the stage. My bad. I didn't even set the stage for everything going on. All right, sorry. So before we get to the prediction,
what's going on here?
Yeah, no, sorry about that. Before we get to the prediction, so real quick, TCU is 6.5-point favorites in this game. And that line has not moved. I'm actually surprised. I thought that would come more in Texas Tech's favor, but it has not. So it's Vegas is like, nah, y'all 6.5-point underdogs, you're not going to take it. Not only that, this series, Texas Tech holds a 3-game leading series, 33-30, with our last one being a win. In this series. So in the Saddle Trophy, we do currently hold the Saddle Trophy. That is up for grabs this weekend in this game. Texas Tech in our last 10 is 7-3. So despite what everybody is saying that the sky is falling, we are 7-3 and we could be worse because TCU is 5-5 in their last 10. I will say also in this one, the over-under in this game, if you are a betting man, is 66.5. So they definitely expect a high-scoring game in this one. But Tech has also won 4 of our last 5, to where TCU has lost 3 of their last 5. So, Jeramey, now, sorry to cut you off there, setting the stage. Who wins this game? TCU, Tech, and what's the score?
Yeah, forgetting everything that happened before Sunday, Monday, since I was in a better mood. Looking at this game, we got a lot of deficiency coming into this game, and mostly, on the defensive line. Like, that's going to hurt us in some games if we don't have this like next man up mentality. So for me, with TCU's kind of stagnating offense over the past couple of games, like it's gotten progressively worse in production wise. They just don't have the momentum for me to come out and do battle in a gunslinging fashion. Like, they haven't had like I don't know. I wouldn't even call Kansas a shootout. They haven't had that kind of game. And so I think that us taking the loss that we did to Baylor, I am hoping that we have a lot more momentum going into this game, even though it's an away game. But I do penalize us for the away game, even though it'll be a good Tech crowd. I penalize us for the away game. I penalize us for having a defensive line that is kind of attritioned. But I think that we're able to pull it out. It's going to be close for me, though. I would say a Texas Tech victory, but it's like 33-31 or 34-31 Texas Tech. And I'm not comfortable. I'm at the end just like, please don't screw this up.
34-31. Joe, who you got?
This will be the 64th time that Texas Tech and TCU have played each other. We are 30-30 with 3 ties. Like, this is the one that we would take this to take the all-time lead on them, if I'm not mistaken. But this
all-time lead, bowl eligible,
all-time lead. I've been calling some of these games to be, a little bit, further decided by points, up in upwards of 2 scores the last couple of weeks. I think I'm going to go a little bit. Hey, I'm still 5-2. We're still on pace, Jeramey. Don't give me that sour grapes look, man. Come on. But yeah, I think this is one of those that, it could be decided by something special teams wise. And given how our special teams was last weekend, I would expect them to make a stride forward instead of another stride backward. I'm calling this game, it's going to be somewhere in the neighborhood of what you called 38-31 Texas Tech, just edging out the Horned Frogs on the road in Fort Worth.
So a bit of a correction. Texas Tech is up on the series 33-30. So this will be our
33-30. Okay.
Yeah, 33-30. This would be our 67th matchup with them. 33 wins for Tech, 30 losses for Tech, and then 3 ties. All right.
So what did you say, Joe? What was your number?
30-30. Or you for the prediction for the game?
Yeah. 38-31.
Yep.
TCU, right?
Absolutely not.
We're about to rattle off 5 wins and get Joe's 10-2, and I'm going to tattoo a tortilla on my ass.
You well,
Well then, so other notes for this game. Joe, you mentioned that Duda Banks is out for this game. Wilcox is also out with a knee injury. Shaw is from the O-line is out with a hand injury. Bryce Ramirez is questionable with a leg, and then Porter, another depth O-lineman, is questionable for his ankle. Ramon Edwards, who I feel like barely played last week, also is questionable with a head injury. We are hurting in this game. So
we play better hurt.
Actually, we were fully healthy last week, so you might actually have to be onto something. But we are hurt in this game. And one other thing to note, though, this is what I will say for Texas Tech. In the Jordan McGuire era, I want to walk y'all back through what has happened after losses a little bit, right? So after the first loss in Jordan McGuire's reign, the very next against NC State, the very next week we played Texas, a ranked Texas team, and beat them in overtime, right? And then after a bad loss to Kansas State, though we lost the next week to Oklahoma State, it was a top 10 opponent on the road. We played them tough, took the L. After that one, blew out West Virginia. Then after an embarrassing loss to Baylor, played a top 10 TCU team and was in a position to win it against Max Duggan, right? After that, blew out Kansas. Then we go to 2023, where after a disappointing game against Wyoming, played Oregon, top 15 Oregon to the gun, right? After a bad loss to West Virginia, beat the hell out of Houston. After, I'm not going to count the BYU game because we had Jake Strong. But after that BYU loss, beat TCU. And then after getting embarrassed by Texas, went and played Cal in a bowl game and beat them. So my point is, Joey has done a really good job of the team. Every single game, with the exception of Jake Strong and BYU, every single game that Texas Tech has played after a loss, they have rebounded and played very well the very next game, right? It's either been a win or a loss that should have been, or a close loss when it should have been a blowout. This game in no way should be a blowout. This is TCU we're talking about. So with that, I got to feel like we're going to win this game. It doesn't make me feel weird that all three of us are picking wins. I definitely expected Joe to pick Tech. That's no surprise there. I was hoping Jeramey would pick TCU, so you disappointed me there, Jeramey. But I am also going to pick Tech to win this game, not because I'm this big believer in Texas Tech, because I just think TCU is a really bad team. Like, there's point blank. Last week I talked about how I thought Baylor was good. They just been playing really good teams, maybe not good, but not as bad as their record said they were. They've been playing really good teams. They proved it to us. This one, I really do think TCU is a bad team. I think just at the root of it, TCU is not a good team. And so I do have Texas Tech winning this game. And how do you like this for them apples? I got Tech winning 41-31. Because I just don't think TCU is very good. And I definitely have the over also. The over-under is 66.5. Both these defenses ain't good. Put that thing up. So, I got 41-31. Surprising that I have Tech winning by multiple scores, especially after what I said last week. But, 41-31. I think we're going to get at least an interception on Josh Huber. But I also think that Taj Brook is going to get, he might get near 200 yards in this game. And so I expect good things to happen there. So 41-31 is where I'm rocking. Let me tell you something. When we lose this game, ain't gonna be too many Texas Tech predictions from your boy. Okay.
That's right. The 3-3 is going to be the worst 3-3 possible. The bad omen of Albert's 3-3 prediction is going to be this.
If we lose this game, because let's face it, the game's out. This will be the worst team we'll play for the rest of the season.
Yeah,
we have Iowa State, Colorado, Oklahoma State, West Virginia. All four of those teams are better than this TCU team. So, I know it's on the road, but especially with Iowa State looming, we got to play better. And I think I do think Joey's a little bit more pointed this week, as he usually is after a bad loss. So, So there it is. So if that happens, Tech does get bowl eligible. We keep the saddle for another year. We extend the lead over TCU, and all your rich friends that went to TCU can rub it in their face for another year. That'd be fantastic. That'd be great. So doing our walk around the Big 12 real quick, looking at some other games in the Big 12. All our games on Saturday. No Friday night games this year, or this week, I should say. I thought Friday night football was your max thing. But this Friday, no Friday night football. We start actually no morning games either, right? I will say, shout out to Big 12 After Dark because we have these Pac-12 teams. Ain't no more 11 a.m. games like that no more. We have not really had very many 11 a.m. games. Flip side of that, we have had these late games, So with that, I'm gonna start it off at the top with the late game Saturday night, Cincinnati at Colorado. Jeramey, who do you think's gonna win that one?
Sorsby, babe. It's in Boulder.
It's in Boulder.
Give me Sorsby to win it, buddy.
Oh, wow. You agree, Joe?
Absolutely.
Both of y'all in Cincinnati.
Buddy is a gamer. Buddy knows ball.
I can't say that, Colorado doesn't have a pass rush. And what does Sorsby do without a pass rush? He cooks. We know because we saw it firsthand. So, I mean, Travis Hunter can't, cover.
He can't defend for 7 seconds.
So you're saying that Sorsby's going to be like, all right, where's Shiloh Sanders out here somewhere?
Right. He's going to
be I wasn't a full-on fledged believer until after we played them. Jeramey was high on Sorsby, and got to give credit where credit's due. And, Sorsby is a really good, better than good quarterback in the Big 12. And he probably doesn't get the respect that, some of these other guys in the conference has garnished. He's kind of flying under the radar, but he's a good quarterback.
I think y'all are both right, but I also think this is a Big 12 title elimination game. And I'm going to go ahead and say Colorado wins it at home. This offense is humming. They beat the hell out of Arizona last week. So I'm going Colorado at home. All right. Going on at 8 o'clock tomorrow or Saturday night, the Sunflower Showdown that at the beginning of the year we thought was going to be a huge game. Now, not so much. Joe, Kansas at K-State. Who you got?
Wildcats running away with Avery Johnson.
Agreed, Jeramey?
Absolutely. Kansas has just shown itself to be a bit abysmal this season.
Yeah, I don't think there's any disagreements there. Definitely K-State winning this one. Jeramey, Utah at Houston. The battle of
this is it, baby. This is what we've been waiting for.
Zion Chris, versus Isaac Wilson. Who would have thought that coming into this season?
Give me Houston, dog. Dude,
you want Houston?
Bro, give me Houston and give me more sad Utah tweets of like, can we please get off this ride? The humiliation, the humble pie has been great from Utah fans. No, but I like this like kind of like re-identified Houston team of, they got to win in the Big 12, and now it's like, let's try to find a way to get another win. They know that they're garbage. And that's a dangerous team to play against, right? If they can start getting an identity, when you're what they say, when you're a loser, you ain't got nothing to lose. So, give me Houston to pull out something crazy against Utah.
Jeramey, Bubala, they got beat 42-14 against Kansas and needed to bring Donovan Smith back in.
That's right, baby. Yeah, what's Utah doing?
Yeah, come on. Trotting out Zach Wilson and Isaac Wilson. Nobody will know the difference. Just trot out Zach Wilson back out there. Joe, who you got?
This is tough for me. And for it really is, because Utah has been a shell of themselves since Arizona State. And, they really weren't right. And, all right, just simple math. TCU loses to Houston. TCU beats Utah. Houston comes out winning. So I'm also calling for Houston to finally put it through the Utah Utes. A close game, but I think Houston's going to figure out a way to come out with a victory on Saturday.
The taxes for this game are more expensive than the actual ticket. Okay, I might just go just off the hell of it. Like, I got nothing else to do Saturday night. Hey, girls, you want to go watch two bad Big 12 football teams play? Sure, Dad. I think Utah's going to win it. Yeah, I think Utah's just a better team, better defense.
Yeah, just telling for
who
telling.
cares?
Who cares?
West Virginia at Arizona, Joe. Who you got?
Oh, Arizona's kind of reeling right now, and they need to figure some things out. West Virginia also reeling, and they need to figure some things out. They're traveling across the country, so I'm going to give the edge to the Arizona Wildcats in a close game.
Arizona. All right, Jeramey, who you got?
I do think it's going to be a close game too. Here's the thing, like you said, West Virginia's been reeling, but they've been playing some good teams, right? Back-to-back top 25 matchups against Iowa State and Kansas State. Two chances to really get it going, but they had fun. And I will say, not a great team, but better than Arizona, right? So even though they will have to travel quite a distance and go through a gauntlet of daylight, of a time zone change, I do think West Virginia has a little bit more than Arizona does at this point in the season.
I wish I could know when Arizona was landing in Tucson. Like if they're going into if they're flying out, like if West Virginia got there today, then I'm very confident they're going to win this game. If they do the stupid thing and don't fly into the night before, ooh, so that's a 3 time zone change.
That's right, man. Let's look at that football.
Wow.
Player.
That's a long track. And I think it's also, I'm giving Arizona the nod because, it's how hard it is to get up for 3 games in a row. You have 2 top 25 games in a row, and now you have to get up for another game. I know it's Arizona and they haven't been playing great, but the whole traveling for me, that kind of makes it a little tough,
I think West Virginia is a better team. I was going to pick West Virginia literally up until that. I'm going Arizona just off the time zone. 3 time zones is a lot. That's a lot. That's too much. All right. And then two teams that have the audacity of playing at the same time of Texas Tech. That's Oklahoma State at Baylor. Jeramey, who you got in that one?
Interesting. I think Baylor showed its chops last week. I think that Baylor's going to have a lot of momentum, and they're going to want to carry that back home where they've had an abysmal crowd and abysmal support. Oklahoma State really talk about a team that's a shell themselves. They were given keys to the Big 12, and they just drove it into the fence. This one will be interesting to watch for sure, because I think Oklahoma State's going to have a lot of identity wrapped around this game of being able to beat a team that historically they've just kind of whipped up and down. But Baylor coming off of a win like that, their first win in the Big 12, they're going to want to get another one. And I think that Baylor's just going to have a little bit too much for Gundy's kind of stagnant Oklahoma State team, which is weird to say, but I think that Baylor's going to have the edge being at home.
Joe, what do you think?
Yeah, I think Baylor gets back-to-back here. Oklahoma State, they already kind of wanted to get away from Alan Bowman and go to Rangel. Then he had that collarbone injury, and now you have 2, I believe, true freshmen backing Bowman, and Bowman wasn't playing great. So, I don't think even if Bowman goes down or if he gets pulled for playing crappy, I don't think that you're in a better position to win this football game. Baylor, they proved a lot this last Saturday. Their schedule had been a little bit tougher than most teams, and it seems to ease up on the back end, and Oklahoma State's just not playing like Oklahoma State. So I have Baylor winning this one in probably a 5 to 10 point game there, and Waco against Oklahoma State.
So I'm going to pick Baylor too, but I will say this. Just like I felt about Baylor last week and that all their losses have been against good teams, Oklahoma State's losses have been to Utah when they had Cam Rising, K-State, West Virginia, BYU. That's 3 ranked teams at the time of playing them. So I do think Oklahoma State's also looking at the rest of their schedule like this back half of the schedule is a lot easier. Baylor, Arizona State, TCU, Tech, Colorado. So Gundy, who I do respect as a coach, We're gonna see just how good of a coach he is, right? Because if he doesn't turn the tide right now, they may not go to a bowl game this year. But I am gonna still pick Baylor at home. Though I will say, have y'all seen how Baylor is trying to stripe out the stadium for this? It looks awful.
Oh,
yeah. It
Yeah.
looks terrible. And then also, not only that, don't stripe out the stadium if you're not giving out free T-shirts. Like, stop
Facts.
doing that.
I hate that.
If you're gonna stripe out the stadium, do free T-shirts. But Baylor's doing it so terrible because they don't want to change the student section. So like, so it's not even a real stripe out because the student section all is yellow. So it's just a whole weird thing. They don't know what they're doing. I've read the Bible many times, and that ain't it. And that is not in there. So I don't know why they want to do it so badly. And last but not least, Joe, 11th ranked BYU at UCF. Who you got?
BYU's been tested of late, but they've still been figuring out ways to win football games, either on a late play drive. Or they had trouble there in Waco for a short period of time. They were given trouble by Oklahoma State last week. I mean, they've been playing a lot of close games, but they've been figuring out a way to win this game. That's going to be an electric atmosphere, but they are also traveling from one coast to the other coast, just like we said, with the West Virginia going over to Tucson. I think that'll have some kind of play in how they play in this particular game. But I just think that BYU figures a way to lose this football game to Central Florida, and Central Florida is going to upset BYU, knocking them out of the undefeated ranks. So I'm calling UCF. Close game. This is one of those games that BYU just doesn't have an answer late in the game, and Central Florida takes the W.
Yikes.
Whoa, big upset. Tortillas and takes. That's what I'm talking about. Jeramey, you got something to match that energy?
No. Joe pointed out that BYU has been finding a way to win. UCF has been finding a way to lose, right? They've kind of controlled their destiny in the past 3 or 4 games and have let it go. And I think that just because they're at home doesn't mean a thing to me, especially since they're playing BYU. They're coming at different ends, right? So UCF may get off to a good start, but BYU is going to have a strong finish. So give me the Cougs to continue this dream run of being undefeated for the first time since, like, what was that, the 80s, 90s?
So I will say with this, they're going over 2 time zones, which is a little bit better. I do think they got screwed as far as the time of the day in this game. Like, they would have much rather this had been a 7:00 kick as opposed to a 3:31. So I do think this game is going to be close because of all of that. But UCF just right now is not a good team. BYU is finding ways to win. They do have a better structure right now. I am going BYU in a closer one than it should be. I wonder what the line is for this game.
I didn't happen to see it.
Let's see here. UCF is actually a 2-point favorite. Wow, I would not have thought that. Yeah, so UCF is actually a 2-point favorite. I am going to pick BYU to win this one. I'm actually surprised. ESPN also has a matchup predictor being in UCF's favor. They must not have watched UCF this year. I'm going to pick BYU to win this one on the road. But all those things, especially the timing of the game, going over 2 time zones, is going to make this a tough one for BYU. Anything else you want to say to the people, Joe?
144 yards is what Taj Brooks needs to eclipse the 4,000 mark, eclipse 4,000 career rushing yards at Texas Tech. He's currently sitting at 3rd. He would need about 210 yards to take over the 2 spot at 4,066. I don't think he gets it this game, but I mean, he could. But I do think he eclipses the 4,000 mark. Other than that, just let's get ready for some football on Saturday, Big 12 slate, and a lot of good games out there. Unfortunately, I'll be at work for a majority of most of them, so I'll have to kind of work and watch on the side. But yeah, ready for it, ready for this Texas Tech team to bounce back, get back into the realm of bowl eligibility, and take our act on the road to Ames next weekend.
That's right. The Pop-Tarts Bowl is still possible.
Dog, I would be stoked.
Still happening. Jeramey, anything else you want to say to people?
Texas Tech softball waxed LCU 17-1. I gave you one guess, probably why that happened. But yeah,
because of LCU. Is that the reason? Is that the guess?
no.
Oh,
Albert
my-
doesn't care a thing about women's sports, everybody. Just keep that in mind.
How dare you? How dare you? I just don't care to give two things about softball. Softball is just not my bag.
Hey,
But,
man.
Soccer-
Everybody's back in a couple of months.
Didn't she take a no into like the 5th or something?
Yep. She did.
Soccer, on the other hand, is now 17th ranked in the nation, and on their
Should
way.
be 10th, but it is what it is, you know.
Yeah,
Playing for the ship tomorrow.
What we're going to do?
Playing
Playing
for
for
the
the
ship.
playing
At
for the
least a piece.
championship. At least a piece of the championship Friday evening. Pack the Walker. Pack the Walker. For me, yeah, Tech. If you want tickets to the Texas Tech TCU game, you're going to be spending a little bit, at least $140 there per person to get into the stadium. It's a nice stadium, M&G Carter Stadium. So the prices being at what they are still leads me to believe that Tech fans are still the ones buying it up because they are giving every other ticket away to this for this team, the TCU team. And so it is actually homecoming for TCU as well. So let's ruin their homecoming like ours was ruined last week. Let's get them, Tech. So for the People's Champ, that is Jeramey Gillen, and the Red Raider expert, that is Joe Lopez. This is your boy, Albie Short. You've been listening to the Tortillas and Takes podcast, part of the 1012 network. As always, stay wrecked, people.